Hey guys, welcome to the UF Disciple channel. Today we're going to be doing a South African holidays buyer's guide for all you folks who are looking to build a computer this holiday season, or are looking to buy some parts for the special people in your life. We'll be focusing specifically on the price points of 6,000 Rand, 10,000 Rand, and 15,000 Rand. So let's get started. So before we dive into the builds themselves, I'd like to make a few things clear. This is not an exhaustive list of your various options at each price point. This is simply meant to serve as a guide to help you figure out what parts would be good at each budget level. I, as well as the helpful guys at WooWare, specifically Yaku, have curated these parts to help meet your needs. Also, all of the prices were based off of WooWare's pricing as of November 25th. However, with the continued degradation of the Rand, these prices will be slightly higher than when I put them together. And if you wait more than a few days, the prices will likely go up more based on current trends. Unfortunately, that's the climate of South African computer parts. We're pretty dependent on the dollar to Rand exchange rate. So up first, I actually have two different 6,000 Rand builds. The reasoning behind this is that 6,000 Rand doesn't honestly buy you much computer. And essentially at this price point, you have to pick your poison. What are you going to sacrifice? Current performance in favor of a future upgrade path, or sacrifice the upgrade path in favor of current performance? So we came up with two different builds that represent either philosophy. So let's start off with the better upgrade path build. We went with the Intel Celeron G1820 dual-core processor clocked at 2.7 gigahertz. And before you start screaming at your computer screen about us using a Celeron, remember that this build is about the future and not about performance necessarily at this moment. We put the Celeron with the MSI H81M-P33 Micro ATX motherboard, and for the graphics card we suggest the PowerColor AX R7 370. For RAM, you can take a single 4GB DIMM of Kingston Value RAM clocked at 1333 MHz. And for the case, you can pick up the ever-reliable and popular Cooler Master K280 Mid-Tower ATX chassis. It doesn't have features that blow you away, but it's functional and has a USB 3.0 front panel port and room for 7 3.5-inch drives, as well as 3 120mm fans, so very functional case. The power supply is the handy Corsair VS450 450 watt power supply, and to top it off for storage, we're using the versatile Western Digital Caviar Blue 1TB 7200 RPM hard drive. There we go. As I mentioned, 6,000 Rand cannot buy you too much these days. However, with the R7 370 in the system, you should be able to play most modern games with decent graphical settings at 1080p with respectable frame rates. It's actually a 20% performance increase over the similarly priced GTX 750 Ti for only 100 Rand more. It's hard to go wrong with picking up the 370. The 4GB of RAM, which is right here, is going to be a limiting factor for some games that you may want to play. It should be noted that there are significant performance drawbacks when you go with a dual-core processor, and a dual-core processor without hyper-threading at that. And certain games like Far Cry 4 refuse to play at all without significant modification. This build was about the future upgrade path though, and going with a single stick of 4GB of RAM allows for an easy upgrade if you're willing to drop an extra 400 Rand. But the biggest upgrade path would be with the LGA 1150 socket motherboard. It would be rather advantageous down the line if you wanted to drop in a Core i5-4460 or maybe even i7-4790. That would allow you to see significant performance increase for simply getting rid of the dual-core processor. So when we compiled this list at the end of November, it was just under 6,000 Rand. Now, because of the exchange rate, it comes to the whopping total of 6,396 Rand. Now let's move on to the 6,000 Rand build that should get you better performance now. For the processor, we're going with an inexpensive quad-core. The AMD Athlon 5350 quad-core processor clocked at 2.05 GHz. For the motherboard, we picked up the MSI MS-AM1i Mini ITX motherboard. And for the graphics card, you can keep the PowerColor AX R7 370 graphics card that we had in the first build. And then following that, the RAM, case, power supply, and hard drive are all the same recommended parts as the first 6,000 Rand build as well. The quad-core processor is going to bring significant performance gains over the dual-core G1820 Celeron. You'll be able to drop in more RAM in the future to bump it up over 4GB, but The AM1 socket is already at its limits with the Athlon 5350. If you wanted to upgrade beyond this, it would require a motherboard swap out as well. Fortunately, the 5350 and the R7 370 should be proficient in most modern titles at 1080p, and without the limitations that you're going to see from the dual-core. The difference in the processor will allow you to see pretty decent performance improvements now, but sadly the deltas in performance will be small if you upgrade your GPU, but not the processor that's in this build. If you're on a small budget and you need to just sling a system together to get you through this upcoming year, this would actually be my go-to recommendation. Price was that this system was exactly 6,000 Rand when I put it together at the end of November, but today it'll cost you 6,274 Rand, 112 Rand less than the first build. Now moving on over to the 10,000 Rand build, there are still some sacrifices that need to be made at this price point, but overall you'll get a great system. For the processor, you can pick up the popular and useful Intel Core i5-4460 quad-core clocked at 3.2 GHz. This is the processor that I've had in my system for the past year, a trustworthy and humble CPU. We'll then pick up the same motherboard as in the 6,000 Rand build with the Celeron, the MSI H81M P33 to cut some costs to be able to afford a better graphics card, which will be the Galax GTX 960 EXOC 4GB GPU. And you can watch my full review of this card by clicking this button up here. But suffice it to say, you'll get at or near 60 FPS at the highest detail settings in many AAA titles. For the RAM, pick up the popular and inexpensive 8GB of G.Skill Aries DDR3 1600MHz RAM. The case, power supply, and hard drive from the other builds continue to be good enough to earn the nod here and round out the rest of the build. This 10,000 Rand build will be enough to play any game that you have in your library. Some games, like The Witcher 3, will have to be turned down a bit in order to hit 60 FPS, but all games will definitely be playable. If gaming is your primary objective, then this build should last you for some time, at least over the next year. The first thing I would suggest throwing in this build once you save up some more cash is an SSD for some faster storage. The clear upgrade path after that would be the graphics card and likely the power supply that more advanced cards would need. The i5-4460 is definitely a handy processor and won't be a bottleneck in most games that you'll play. For the final pricing, even with the exchange rate difficulties, this build comes in at 9,904 Rand, still under that 10,000 Rand sweet spot. Finally, for our most expensive build with 15,000 Rand, we have a few significant improvements. For the processor, we keep the Intel i5-4460, but we bump up the motherboard to the MSI Z97S SLI Crate Edition to help support the higher frequency RAM, which is 16 GB of the G.Skill Sniper 1866 MHz DDR3 RAM. The graphics card gets increased to the Galax GTX 970 EXOC GPU, which is the best bang for your buck card that you're going to find here in South Africa. And you can check out my review on this card right there at that top button. The Cooler Master R6k 280 continues to be the handy case with a good price point and good functionality, so we won't change that here. For the power supply, we increase the wattage to a Corsair VS550 watt to help support the GTX 970. We keep the Western Digital Caviar 1TB drive, but then we relegate it to a storage support role with the primary boot drive being somewhere over here, the ADATA Premiere Pro SP 600 128GB solid-state drive. To justify keeping the i5-4460 in this build, it was to save a few bucks, but also because upgrading to an i7 or even an unlocked i5 processor won't yield a good price to performance improvement over increasing the graphics card if you're looking for a gaming computer. I also personally think that the SSD is a more important upgrade than bumping up to a 4690K or 4790K. The 16 GB of RAM will allow you to meet the ridiculous minimum of 12 GB on Batman Arkham Knight. I mean, come on, Warner Brothers. Seriously? 12 GB for a Batman game? Eish. The Galax GTX 970 will give nearly 90 FPS in most games at 1080p, and 1440p becomes a playable resolution for most games as well. This is definitely a formidable system in many respects. Considering future upgrades though, a second GTX 970 wouldn't be a terrible idea with the SLI motherboard if you're willing to jump up to at least a 750 watt power supply. And an i7 4790K could help if you're working in more professional settings like with rendering environments. Cost-wise, the system, as of today, comes in at 14,915 Rand. Again, I want to reiterate that this isn't meant to be an exhaustive or an exact list of what you should get for your computer, but rather to give you some good ideas of what you can get with the various budget amounts. It's really all about priorities. If you'd rather have a nicer looking system at 15,000 Rand than the better graphics card, then do that. If you want a large SSD instead of the i5 and want to drop down to an i3, then definitely do that. If you prefer an AMD over Intel and Nvidia, then work on that. We just wanted to get a few ideas started of what's possible at each price point. And with that, I want to give a massive shout out to Wootware for helping me work on this buyer's guide for this festive season. The entire team over there is dedicated to working tirelessly to make sure they bring you the best customer service and lowest prices in South Africa on a huge variety of computer components. In fact, Wootware supplies each and every item featured in today's video. So if you're in South Africa and looking to build a computer this holiday season, head on over to wootware.co.za to woot up your life. And until the 14th of December, Wootware is hosting a giveaway of 6,000 Rand in store credit, just enough to build the first 2 systems featured in this video. You can check out this video here to find out about the specific details on that giveaway. And that's it for my 2015 holidays build guide. Like this video if you found it helpful, dislike it if it was more disappointing than the recent decline the Rand has suffered against the dollar. You can subscribe to stay up to date on future tech-related videos, including a review I have coming up on the PowerColor R9 380X. If you're looking to watch more of my videos, you can check out this video up here of my review of the G.Skill KM780 gaming keyboards, which will hopefully be coming to South Africa soon. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.